Welcome back to Palangi 21. Today I will show you a 2020 American coming-of-age drama film written and directed by Alice Wu titled The Half of It. It stars Leah Lewis, Daniel Diemer, and Alexis Lemire, and tells about teenager Ellie Chu who agrees to write a love letter for a jock while falling for his crush. In narration, Ellie Chu tells the audience how the ancient Greeks believed humans were originally born with 2 heads, 4 arms, and 4 legs, until the gods cleaved them into 2, leaving mortals to wander the earth longing and searching for their other half. When the 2 halves of the same soul reunite, it would be the greatest joy. She notes that people spend too much time looking for love since life is ultimately irrational and meaningless. This isn't a love story, or at least not the kind where anyone actually gets what they want. Ellie lives in a small town called Squamish. In school, Ellie makes money writing essays for other kids in the class in exchange for cash. Her teacher Mrs. Giselle Schaap lets it slide, joking she'd hate to have to read the essays those kids were really going to write. She gives Ellie an application for Grinnell College, but Ellie refuses, saying that she has to go to the local college because she's been offered a full scholarship there. While riding her bike home from school, she is approached by Paul Munsky, who wants her to write a love letter to Astor Flores. Ellie refuses, saying love letters are supposed to be personal and it would be wrong. At home, Ellie watches films with her dad Edwin, and helps him pay the bills. When she finds some overdue, she agrees to write the letters for Paul at a higher price point. Ellie reads Paul's letter and thinks it's a mess. He says it's because she's never been in love, which makes Ellie angry, but she writes the letter anyway, using a Wim Wenders quote. Astor writes back, noting that she knows Paul stole the quote. Ellie writes a response for Paul, where she mentions she sometimes hides behind other people's words, and speaks from the heart about how she feels about the world, and that if she knew what love was, she would quote herself. Astor writes back, opening up about how things can be hard for her too sometimes. Paul wants to text her immediately, but Ellie notes that if he does he will be like everyone else. She keeps writing letters, and Paul keeps paying. Astor accidentally drops a letter on the floor, which Mrs. Giselle Schaap finds and confronts Ellie about. Ellie insists she will stop, but she and Astor keep writing back and forth, opening up about their fears and dreams. When Astor opens up about how she loved painting but stopped, afraid of making bold strokes in her work and ruining what she'd already made, Ellie directs her to a wall where they take turns going and making paint strokes on it, eventually creating a beautiful painting of a girl reaching for a star. Paul is tired of waiting and texts Astor. Paul finally goes on a date with Astor, and she gives him a book which she thought he'd like based on their conversations. Ellie listens from outside as Paul struggles to find anything to say, leading to an incredibly awkward date. The next day, Ellie tells him he should give up with Astor since they have nothing in common. But when Paul defends her from some bullies, Ellie goes back to helping him, and begins teaching him about the things she liked to talk to Astor about. They follow Astor and find out she loves horror films, an interview trip to find weaknesses. Paul asks Ellie why she stays in Squamish and she angrily explains that her father moved here from China with a PhD, but was discriminated against because of his accent and never made it beyond Squamish. She asks him why he stays, and he explains he has to stay in the family's sausage business or break his mother's heart. He has an idea for a new cuisine called the taco sausage, but his family won't try it. He's tried writing food critics in bigger cities but hasn't heard anything back. Ellie and Paul continue to get to know each other, and Ellie asks Paul what he likes about Astor. He comes up with a not too wordy response, having trouble talking, and Ellie gives her own version of what she loves about Astor. Paul is upset because that's a real answer of what love should be and he can't come up with one. Ellie tells Paul that no one tries harder than he does, and that's love too. For dinner, Paul cooks the taco sausage for Ellie and Edwin. They watch a film where a man chases after a woman on a train as she watches from the window. Paul thinks it's romantic, but Ellie thinks it's stupid. Paul goes on a second date with Astor, but when he again has trouble being able to say anything, Ellie begins texting Astor as him, explaining she gets nervous about talking when Astor is around. Eventually, Paul stands up and tells Aster how much he likes her, to Ellie's shock. Afterward, he tells Ellie that they kissed. Not only that, but he heard from a different food critic who wants to try his creation. He assumes the critic he reached out to must have contacted him. Ellie asks how he knew it was the right moment, and he explains sometimes a girl gives a look and you have to go for it. At the school recital, Ellie begins to play the piano but the strings are bad, and the audience begins laughing. Paul tosses her a guitar and tells her to play her song, which she does, and the crowd likes it. Afterward, Paul takes Ellie to the afterparty where she gets drunk and throws up. He takes her back to his place and puts her to bed, and out of her bag falls letters she's written to multiple food critics nearby about Paul's food. The next day Aster comes by Paul's house to give him a painting, but is surprised to find Ellie, who explains that she and Paul are just friends. Aster goes with Ellie to the train station that she works at, then brings her to the watering hole. Ellie nervously gets in with her clothes on. Aster confesses she heard Trig telling her father he was going to propose, wondering if she should accept. She says she isn't sure what she believes in, but she asked God for a sign and then got Paul's letter. Ellie reveals that she does not believe in God and talks about her deceased mother. Aster drops Ellie off at home, where Paul has made dinner for her and Edwin. Aster then talks to Paul, who kisses her and invites her to his football game, while Ellie watches them from her window, and she decides to apply to Grinnell College. At the game, Ellie watches and encourages Paul as he makes the only touchdown for their notoriously bad team. After a game, mistakenly believing that she loves him, and having developed feelings for her, Paul attempts to kiss Ellie, but she rejects him. Aster sees them and walks away angrily. Paul realizes that Ellie loves Aster and, due to his religious upbringing, tells Ellie that it is a sin. When Paul drops off sausage for Edwin, he asks Paul if they broke up, and Paul explains they weren't dating. They have a conversation about love where Ellie's father asks Paul if he has ever loved someone so much, that he did not want to change anything about them. The whole town is at church when Trig proposes to Aster, who says yes, but Ellie and Paul publicly interrupt the moment. Paul says that love isn't pretending and that no one should have to pretend, and he's realized how hard it would have to be to pretend your whole life. He says he doesn't want to be someone who would stop loving someone else because of how they love. Ellie admits she has been pretending, and tells everyone that love is not patient or kind, but rather is horrible, selfish, and bold. She says it isn't about finding your perfect half, it's about trying and failing. She says it's about being able to ruin your good painting and make it a great painting, which makes Aster realize that she's been exchanging letters with Ellie all along. Aster is upset and slaps Paul. At home, Edwin encourages Ellie to go to Grinnell College, wanting her not to be like him, stuck in Squamish. Eventually, Ellie does decide to go to Grinnell, and right before leaving she goes to see Aster, who has made a portfolio to go to art school. Aster admits that deep down she probably knew Ellie didn't use enough emojis to be Paul. She tells Ellie that for what it's worth, it's not like the thought never crossed her mind, and that maybe if things were different. Ellie teases her about not being sure once again, and Aster says maybe in a few years she'll be sure. She tells Ellie to find something to believe in, and Ellie leaves, but then rushes back and kisses Aster, and tells her she'll see her in a few years. Paul sees Ellie off at the train platform, and tells her that his sausages have received good reviews, and that he will keep visiting her father. Paul says goodbye to her at the train, and she teases him not to cry. Once on the train, she looks scared, but when the train leaves, Paul runs beside the train as it leaves just like the film they watched. Ellie laughs at his silliness, then observes the passengers around her as she goes off to start a new journey in her life. This film is certainly a beautiful story about love and friendship. It is a very relatable story about the process of discovering love and what comes with it. It follows a shy girl Ellie who is hired by Paul to help him write letters to his crush Aster. But their new and unlikely friendship gets complicated when Ellie discovers she has feelings for the same girl. At first I thought it would be a love triangle story, but it wasn't. The story is much more than that. I love the scenes where Ellie and Aster exchange messages, and connect with each other. The story is beautifully wrapped, maybe not in the traditional sense of a happy ending but in its own way. The dialogue is good, but not like any high school teen love film. Love is not patient or kind, but rather is horrible, selfish, and bold. Also, the acting of the main characters is very good. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe, and turn on notification.